الجلسة الحالية سنلقي ضوء على المسألة، على المشهد الإيراني الأمريكي الشرق أوسطي عموما، ولكن من منظور دولي. سيرأس هذه الجلسة الأخ والصديق الأستاذ عدنان، والأستاذ نائب سابق يعني، وهو سياسي أردني معروف. وأنا بالنسبة لي أهم في الأمر أنه صديق شخصي وصديق لمركز القدس وشريك في كثير من نشاطاته، ودائما إسهاماته تسعدنا. ولدينا متحدثين اثنين، روبرت ويوليا من روسيا والولايات المتحدة، وبنعتذر عن عدم أو عن الإخفاق في تأمين متحدث أوروبي بسبب الاضطراب والخلل اللي حصل كما أوضحنا. الميكروفون معك سيدي.
شكرا أيها الصديق، شكرا لك على الكلمات الطيبة، وطبعا الشكر الجزيل بدون شك لمركز القدس وللأخوة على الجهودهم المباركة في كونراد أيدناور على الجهود الطيبة. شكرا على هاي الجهود الجبارة، لأنه حقا يعني بنفس الموعد قدرنا نعمل موعد المحاضرة اللي كانت والندوة الدائرة الطاولة المستديرة في عمان، قدرنا نعمل بنفس المواعيد في بيروت، وهذا تطلب منكم جهود. وبهذا المجال يعني اسمحوا لي اني اشكر جميع القائمين في مركز القدس، وزي ما تكلمت بكونارد أديناور على الجهود اللي قاموا فيها من اجل انجاح هذا المؤتمر وهذه الطاولة المستديرة. وصحيح انه اللي احنا بالنسبه لنا الاردن، اسمحوا لي بس بكلمتين بالنسبه احنا للاردنيين الموجودين هون، هو موجه للجميع. صحيح انه امر جيد بالنسبه لنا احنا الاردنيين القدوم الى لبنان، دوله شقيقه ودوله صديقه وبنحب نجي عليها دائما، ولكني اسف بنفس الوقت لعدم اسف لبلدي لعدم استطاعتهم ولعدم المقدره على استضافه هذه الطاوله المستديره في الاردن، وهذا يعني صراحه بدرك امر مؤسف. وكنت أنا بشوف إن الندوة كانت أمر إيجابي جدا لنا في الأردن من جميع النواحي، سواء ديمقراطيا أو ثقافيا سياسيا اقتصاديا، يعني من جميع النواحي كان أمر مهم. وبهذا المقام بتوجه لإخواني الأردنيين، يعني أنه حين العودة للأردن هذا مش لازم، يعني الموضوع مش إنه موضوع سهل يعني، أو إنه موضوع إن نتركه مرور الكرام. أعتقد إنه حتى نتفادى بالمستقبل إنه يتكرر مثل هذا الموضوع، إنه ما بنعملش ندوة ثقافية، ندوة ديمقراطية، ندوة سياسية بالأردن. أمر بالنهاية يعني صراحة مؤسف، وأمر يعني مش لا يليق بينا، لا يليق بالأردن أنا بعتبره. خرجت قليلا عن النص، ولكن اسمحوني كان ضروري بهذا الاعتبار. بالعودة بعد ذلك بالعودة لندوتنا، احنا هذا الصباح ويعني شفنا فول إميرشن بالنسبة للوضع في إيران وللوضع العلاقات الأمريكية الإيرانية. سمعنا رؤية داخلية من إيران حول الوضع بإيران، وسمعنا رؤية عربية بأكثر من حتى بالمداخلات من الإخوان حول الوضع في إيران. سمعنا كذلك يعني من مختلف الحضور ومن الإخوان الإيرانيين المقيمين بالداخل أو بالخارج وجهة نظرهم حول هذا الموضوع. راح نسلط الضوء في ندوتنا حاليا في لقائنا الحالي على موضوع مهم من وجهة نظر يعني أصدقاء يمثلوا برضو مؤسسات من دول إلها وزن كبير بمنطقتنا وإلها تلعب دور رئيسي. ومعنا الأستاذ البروفيسور الدكتور روبرت ريغز، أستاذ العلوم السياسية وخبير في الشأن الإيراني في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية، والدكتورة يوليا سفيشينيكوفا. اعذروني إذا ما حكيت الأسامي، إذا حكيتهم في غلط أو شيء، ولكن هاي المقدرة الموجودة، وهي باحثة في معهد الخبراء في جامعة البحوث الوطنية في المدرسة العليا للاقتصاد في موسكو. راح زي ما اتبعنا النقاش في هذا الصباح، راح أعطي ربع ساعة لكل واحد من الإخوان يدلو بدلوه، بعد ذلك نفتح المجال أمام النقاش أمامكم جميعا، وثم نشوف حسب الوقت. معنا ساعتين أعتقد لهذه الندوة، نحاول نغلقهم في الوقت المقرر. تفضل أستاذ روبرت ريغز.
So I had let me turn this on. I'm loud anyway, but even louder with this. So I had
Again.
Is it on? It is on, right? You can hear me fine. All right. So I had a plan. I had written this paper or this presentation in English, and then I translated it in Arabic, and I practiced it a number of times, and it was about 25 or 35 minutes long. At first run, it was about an hour, and I sped up. But then I realized it seems like the translation is effective and good, so I'm going to just go ahead and read it in English. And if any of you want the Arabic version, I'm happy to send it to you. I have it both. So, okay. So first of all, I'd like to thank the Al-Quds Center and also Konrad Adenauer for putting together this very, very important roundtable, and I'm honored to be a part of it. Dr. Uraib asked me to address the following topic: the U.S.-Iranian crisis from the United States perspective. And I'm certainly not here as a representative of the U.S. government by any means. What I'm going to do is to address this topic in the limited time given, first by discussing the stated reasons for the withdrawal from the nuclear agreement from the Trump administration and the timeline. Then I will discuss 3 future scenarios that could result from the withdrawal and give my analysis of the likelihood for each scenario and their varying implications for the region. First, as you all know, on May 8th, 2018, President Donald Trump held a meeting in the diplomatic reception room, ironically named, of course, of the White House, in which he stated, "I'm announcing today that the United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal. In a few moments, I will sign a presidential memorandum to begin reinstating U.S. nuclear sanctions on the Iranian regime. We will be instituting the highest level of economic sanction. Any nation that helps Iran in its quest for nuclear weapons could also be strongly sanctioned by the United States," unquote. He then signed the memorandum that officialized the new old position of the United States towards the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran, one of maximum economic and military pressure, during which, in the words of Trump, the U.S. would work to, quote, "find a real, comprehensive, and lasting solution to the Iranian nuclear threat. This will include efforts to eliminate the threat of Iran's ballistic missile program, to stop its terrorist activities worldwide, and to block its menacing activity across the Middle East. In the meantime, powerful sanctions will go into full effect. If the regime continues its nuclear aspirations, it will have bigger problems than it has ever had before," unquote. After signing of the memorandum, a 6-month countdown started until the full sanctions regime could be re-implemented in its entirety on November 5th, 2018. During the past 6 months, the U.S. has reached out to its European and Asian allies to reassure them that their economies would not be affected detrimentally, particularly by the re-implementation of sanctions against the purchase of Iranian oil and natural gas. One result of those negotiations was that on November 5th, the U.S. issued waivers for several countries who rely on the purchase of Iranian oil, such as Japan and India, to continue purchasing Iranian oil at lower levels. So what are the future scenarios resulting from the withdrawal of the U.S. from the JCPOA? In the first scenario, what I term Trumpian utopia, due to extreme financial hardship and economic pressure, Iran would agree to open up all of its military installations to verifiable inspections to ensure that no ballistic missiles or other nuclear-related materials were being produced. In addition, Iran would withdraw all material and moral support from any non-state actor, militia, or paramilitary group across the Middle East region. Iran would also cease any use of hostile rhetoric such as "death to America," either internally or externally towards the United States or its allies, including Israel. This, in the Trump dream world, would lead to a warming of U.S.-Iranian relations and eventual restoration of full diplomatic and economic ties. In this scenario, Iran would engage in robust security and trade cooperation with regional neighbors, including Jordan and the Gulf Cooperation Council countries. This is, I would argue, the least likely scenario to emerge from the current crisis. It requires little or no modification of U.S. current policies in the wider Middle East, but it demands deep modification of Iran's domestic and foreign policy and effective disarmament, a non-starter for a negotiated solution. It also completely ignores pre-existing competing security and trade agreements between various other countries in the Middle East region, as well as the varying interests of the different countries. Although Donald Trump claimed in his May 8th speech that we will be working with our allies to find a real comprehensive and lasting solution to the Iranian nuclear threat, the actions of the U.S. administration are highly unlikely to change Tehran's policies. Historical data shows little, if any, correlation between the resources at Iran's command and its regional behavior, and this is the crucial point. Rather, the extent to which the Islamic Republic feels threatened or senses opportunity in its neighborhood largely defines its conduct. Measured against that standard, the Trump administration's aggressive policy is more likely to spur Iran's regional activism rather than curb it. A better alternative exists. It would require the Trump administration not to ignore Iran's regional interests, but rather to acknowledge that it has legitimate security concerns. It also requires that the U.S. provide incentives for its allies to accept such a warming of relations between the two countries, including economic incentives and security guarantees in the short term to build trust. Unfortunately, none of this is likely to happen, as all of the statements that have been made by Donald Trump, National Security Advisor John Bolton, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and Secretary of Defense James Mattis, arguably the foremost important members of the U.S. government, indicate a more confrontational posture on the American side, one that could lead to the second worst-case scenario, which is war. Although unlikely, a worst-case scenario is open direct conflict between the U.S. and Iran. Many scholars, myself included, view economic sanctions as a type of economic warfare, since they constitute a direct attack on the sovereignty of a country. Without an independent economy, it is difficult to make the case that a true sovereign nation exists. Therefore, when harsh economic sanctions are levied against a state, oftentimes the government of that state opts for regime survival, or regime in a generic sense, not the negative regime. Okay, regime survival tactics that can include any method required to undermine those sanctions. In the particular case of the Islamic Republic of Iran, which has faced crippling sanctions throughout its nearly 40-year history, a combination of both a doctrine of economic self-sufficiency and what is sometimes called forward defense tactic has characterized its foreign and domestic policymaking. In fact, in the period immediately before the JCPOA, in 2011 to 2015, a plethora of multilateral and international sanctions inflicted maximal harm on Iran's economy, which shrank at the rate of 7.7% in 2012. As oil exports declined by half, the currency fell by 200%, and inflation rose almost 40%. Yet, in this same time period, many consider the most significant expansion of Iran's military intervention in the region. A product of the uprising in Syria, Tehran's growing rivalry with Riyadh, and the fight against the Islamic State. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, Iran's weapons transfers to its allies in Syria and Iraq peaked during that period. Resource scarcity at home neither prevented Iran from extending a multi-billion-dollar line of credit to Damascus, nor from mobilizing Shia militias from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iraq to fight in Syria. Iran also increased its support for the Houthi rebels at the same time, training and equipping them. Again, sanctions did not cause Iran to retreat from its regional involvement in other countries. Although Iran's empowering of non-state actors in neighboring countries is a source of continued tension with its neighbors and the United States, it has not led to warfare with the U.S. directly, nor is it likely to do so in the current circumstances. Successive U.S. administrations have been advised by the U.S. Armed Services leadership that a costly war with Iran will destabilize the region and is not guaranteed to result in a more favorable Iranian government. In fact, I would strongly argue that the history of the Iran-Iraq war shows that the Iranian population coalesced around the new post-revolutionary government when it was attacked by Saddam Hussein. Instead, the U.S. has historically opted for a containment policy, positioning its armed forces in every country bordering Iran, as well as other regional neighbors, even including Jordan. Although the prospects of a U.S.-Iran war remain very low, it cannot be completely discounted. If Iran could, ironically, Iran could become less risk-averse if Washington was able to succeed in crippling its economy, a stated goal of Secretary of State Pompeo. As an Iranian official put it, if the economy spirals out of control, the leadership in Tehran will welcome a crisis that could change the subject domestically and rally the population around the flag. Given the high level of friction between Iran, the U.S., and their respective allies in the region, such a clash could easily spiral into a disastrous conflict. Indeed, there are early signs that the U.S. approach may already be backfiring. The Trump administration has accused Iran of targeting U.S. diplomatic facilities in Baghdad and Basra through its allied Shia paramilitary groups. If true, these attacks would constitute an escalation unseen in Iraq since 2011 and indicate the tightening sanctions has made Iran more, not less aggressive, which is what we would expect. Equally risky is a scenario in which Iran's economy stays stable and U.S. sanctions fail to curb Iran's regional policy. This could prompt allies such as Saudi Arabia or Israel to provoke a confrontation between Washington and Tehran that would significantly weaken their regional foe on their behalf. As an Israeli official put it, my distinct impression is that Netanyahu is pushing towards actual use of force by the U.S. against Iran. It is unclear, however, what is the scope, a single attack or a broader move. To me, speaking about myself, this is the largest danger, a small U.S. ally dragging the U.S. and Iran into open conflict. A third, and what I would argue the most likely scenario, is that a new Cold War will emerge, in which Iran will find allies from outside of the region to counterbalance the economic pressure of the new sanctions and increase its support for regional allies and for non-state actors within states, neighboring states. Its economy will not grow at a desired level, but it will not collapse either. The sectors of the Iranian economy controlled by state-managed corporations, as well as reinvigorated smuggling networks to exploit the sanctions regime, will strengthen. This, in turn, will increase the domestic power of factions within the Iranian government that support continued confrontation with the United States, such as the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. And that would bolster their popular support and, of course, their bank accounts. We can already see that Iran has vigorously engaged with Qatar in the aftermath of the economic blockade imposed upon it by Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, at least doubling its export trade to Iran in the last 1.5 years. Simultaneously, Iran has forged more robust ties with Turkey and Russia within the context of the Syrian civil war. Ali Khamenei and other Iranian leaders have referenced a turn toward the east, presumably meaning China. For now, Iran is expecting the remaining signatories to the JCPOA to provide it with an economic lifeline in the face of unilateral U.S. sanctions. Indeed, the EU announced that it will soon be implementing a special purpose vehicle to allow payment for goods between itself and Iran without violating U.S. sanctions, and Russia has stated they will ignore sanctions as well. Tehran appears to be pursuing a relatively cautious path in the region even after Trump's election. It has not responded to the more than 200 Israeli airstrikes on its assets in Syria or engaged in skirmishes with the U.S. Navy in the Strait of Hormuz. Several studies have shown that Iran's regional defense policy was defined and shaped at a time of economic scarcity, that being during the Iran-Iraq War. Its forward defense policy, an effort to exploit weak states such as Lebanon, post-2003 Iraq, Civil War time Syria, Yemen, and Palestine, where it can expand its influence and fight through proxies without direct harm or threat to itself, originated in the 1980s. At that time, the newly established order in Tehran, which aspired to export its revolution abroad, simultaneously felt besieged by foreign and domestic enemies seeking to undermine it and isolate it in the face of the invasion by Saddam Hussein's Iraq, armed to the teeth by Arab and Western states. I don't know if you want to translate that armed to the teeth, but anyway, heavily armed by Arab and Western states. Most importantly, historical data shows that Iran's policy of backing non-state actors has remained largely consistent in good economic times as well as bad. As a senior Iranian official put it in one study, when you rely on a strategy for your survival, you rely on it come hell or high water. I translated that jahim or tawfan in Arabic, but anyway. This scenario is the most likely to continue to develop as long as the current U.S. administration remains in power. Iran may well choose to tactically retreat or halt certain activities as it has in the past. It likewise is logical that when it has additional resources, it will continue expanding its regional footprint. But nothing in the history of the Islamic Republic suggests that sanctions will prompt a substantive shift in its foreign policy in the way that Donald Trump desires. To believe otherwise is to misunderstand the sources of Tehran's conduct predicated on the notion that strategic depth, achieved through backing allies, partners, and non-state actors, is vital for its national security. Israel's invasion of Lebanon in 1982, the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003, and the Saudi-led war in Yemen since 2015 has allowed Iran to exploit chaos and deepen its clout. In all these cases, it took advantage of its adversaries' mistakes and filled security vacuums created by failing states. If Iran continues to support non-state actors in the region, weak states will continue to destabilize. Refugee populations will increase, and regional economic stability will decrease. All of these effects will also impact Jordan, of course, a country particularly susceptible to economic pressures and heavily dependent on the U.S. for its security. In conclusion, the withdrawal of the U.S. from the JCPOA on May 8, 2018 was a major setback for international diplomacy and negotiated solutions to resolving competing state interests. The U.S., due to its global economic dominance, does still have significant leverage in its relationship with Iran. However, if it seeks to leverage the pressure it has managed to accumulate against Iran to produce a shift in Tehran's policy, it also needs to acknowledge Iran's legitimate security concerns, namely its comparatively inferior conventional military capabilities. Already spending less than 3% of its GDP on the military, at $16 billion last year as opposed to $76 billion for the Saudis, Tehran is unlikely to agree to compromise its national security assets, which is what it views its non-state partners as, for economic incentives, since it views its forward defense policy as critical to its survival. Ideally, the U.S. should show its willingness to address these legitimate concerns and provide viable security assurances to Iran's leaders. In parallel, the U.S. would need to work with other regional actors toward a broader security architecture that includes Iran. Simultaneously, Tehran should take steps to address its neighbors' concerns, including, of course, even Jordan. Most importantly, to recognize that the more its security doctrine promotes expeditionary warfighting through non-state actors, the more it will provoke aggressive pushback by its adversaries. Similarly, Iran should encourage the integration of its non-state allies into their respective countries' security bodies under the direct and effective control of their central governments. And it should stop exporting ballistic missile technology to non-state actors in the region. The alternative to both sides taking a step back from their escalatory path is a sanctions regime, sanctions, we'll say, And now I'm so sensitive about the word regime. Okay. Escalatory path from sanctions that penalize both the Iranian government and the Iranian people, but does not enhance peace and security in the region, and could, under certain circumstances I've already mentioned, lead to war. That said, unfortunately, such policy shifts by either the US or Iran in the current environment are hard to envision given the Trump administration's current posture towards Iran. Thank you very much.
شكرا دكتور روبرت. تحدثت 20 دقيقة تقريبا، وسنعطي نفس الوقت للدكتورة يوليا. ركزت في دخلتك في ما تفضلت به على الأردن، لأنه يمكن كان محضر على أيام الندوة في الأردن، أنا لاحظت هيك أتوقع. بس أثرت بمداخلاتك أيضا، وهون بسجل يعني صراحة استغرابي من دولة زي أمريكا زي الولايات المتحدة، يعني الشعور العدائي اللي هو سواء ضد إيران أو ضد دول المنطقة، وخاصة يعني احنا بنلاحظ ضد القضية الفلسطينية. هل يعقل إنه مثلا فيش بأمريكا دوائر تدرس الأثر الرجعي ولا الأثر السيء، لأنه راح يعمل هذا التطرف أكثر بالمنطقة، وهذا عم بيحصل حاليا. يعني أنا بستغرب إنه هذا يحدث في دولة مثل الولايات المتحدة. نعطي الدكتورة يوليا برضو 20 دقيقة، تفضلي. هذا أول سؤال. The first question. Okay.
I'll try to do my best, but I don't promise to stay within 15 minutes, and I hope you could be lenient and indulge me with some more if I extend it a little bit, because I'll try to not to read from what I prepared, because anyway, I find it useless after our discussions this morning. I tried to remodify it somehow in my mind to suit it to the purpose of our discussion here. And I felt that there are so many things to talk about, and there are so many basic things that we don't have a common vision at. So probably they also need to be clarified. And since we spoke about many issues with regards to the Iran's position in the region, its nuclear program, and joint comprehensive plan of action, I'll try to highlight probably a Russian stance here, although my opinions are of my own, and I do not, as well as Robert said, I do not represent the Russian government here. So please take note of that. After the overview made by Dr. Saleh, I also thought to probably clarify my own view, how I see the situation, and I tended to look at the situation around the national nuclear program of Iran as, and at its position in the region from the point of constructivism, and in particular the Boson-Wever theory of regional security complexes, because to me it helps to understand better how the Iranian nuclear issue was securitized, and to think of strategies how we are going to desecuritize it. I should say at the beginning as well that I tended to be pessimist about even a chance of the so-called 5+1 group striking this agreement. I'm not like many of my Russian colleagues, and even I remember on the eve when they sort of signed the agreement, they agreed upon it, many of my articles, they used to be heavily corrected by the editors towards a very optimistic direction. While I had to recorrect it back because I didn't say it, and I actually meant that I was very pessimistic, and I remained very pessimistic even after July 2015, and even after January 2016 when they started to implement the agreement, due to the simple reason which I think has been mentioned earlier today. The crisis, as it was mentioned in the title of our conference as well, is systemic. It wasn't started with the Iranian nuclear program. It will not end with the agreement devoted solely to the Iranian nuclear program. As we mentioned earlier, it's been 40 years, almost 4 decades of the Islamic Republic, and since the moment that Iran stopped being one of the pillars of the United States in the region, probably even not the embassy siege played that role, although it left a moral scar, especially for the Americans who still remember what happened back then. But I believe the reason for that crisis is more geopolitical, and that's why we can see how GCPOA is crumbling. And here, I guess I sound pessimistic again. Thus, it's practically impossible to look at Iran-Russia relationship and how Russia looks at Iran's regional stance without looking at a number of factors, which one of them is the external factor or external variable, how some of my Iranian colleagues also call it sometimes. It's the United States. Sometimes Israel also takes place. And we look at it as in a framework of a sort of triangle, how this party, so it's not two-side relationship between Iran and Russia only. There is always at least a third party, which is, in our case, which I'm trying to highlight here is today is the United States. And the situation didn't actually change much with President Trump coming to power. Trump or no Trump, there were certain factors affecting Russia's view at the situation with Iran in the region. I wanted just to mention several basic points, which are, I think, directly related to what we're talking about. First of all is that Russia, two parties of this triangle, Russia and the United States, despite of all the recent developments that you were all observing, they acknowledge the value of talking and communicating to each other. And they keep doing that whether our partners, like our Iranian colleagues, are happy or unhappy with it. And one of the important dimensions of these talks is about the arms control and the arms control in the region. And there has been a big deal of these talks devoted to this issue. And especially in the light of the use of chemical weapons in Syria, in the light of the system of deterrence between Russia and the United States also crumbling. As all of you know, one of the agreements was withdrawn by the US recently, and one of them is, the other one is START, which probably is going to be ended in 2021, which its expiry date is coming. Well, Russia was always very active proponent of creation of weapon of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East, which was suggested as early as in 1995, and it is still strongly pursuing the issue. And even one of the organizations which I'm affiliated with, we have consultative status at the UN Secretary General on this issue. So there's been there have been very active talks ongoing, and not the least here is that Russia is looking at the US withdrawal from GCPOA, and it concerns it. Because the main narrative in Russia supporting the GCPOA always has been the legal framework. It's not only about it emerging as a strong regional actor, and or how we sometimes call it, raising up from its knees, what Moscow is doing, but also looking at the matter within the legal framework, respecting and abiding by the international agreements. And as all of you, I think, know, Russia played an important role in negotiating the agreement. And another thing is to remember is that, because sometimes I noticed we have very different vision of things which are going on in the Middle East. Russia is not there, of course, to protect Iran's or anyone's interests apart from its own. And I think it has been very well demonstrated since the Russian involvement into the Syrian conflict, and due to the other disagreements which I will try to highlight later. So I actually was planning to prepare some presentation for you, but then I saw that nobody does it, so I don't want it to be a white crow. But I wanted to show you some interesting graphs and pictures which are very telling about Russians' goals in the Middle East, which, let's say, not the least of it is advertising and advertising its arms. Of course, fighting extremism and attracting investments, they're also there. Maintaining energy prices, supporting friendly forces, and here we remember about Iran. Secure and limited military presence in the Middle East. Now, a little bit about Russia-Iran relationship, which some see as especially our politicians, sometimes they like to call it strategic, which are unfortunately nowhere near. And again, I think I'm being realistic, not pessimistic here. Because two main pillars of interaction between Russia and Iran, which we see, has been recently limited cooperation in Syria and Russia's support for JCPOA. That's practically it. All the rest, unfortunately, remained wishful thinking for the past years. However, due to the given role of Russia, how it positions itself in the Middle East, as well as how it sees international legal frameworks, or at least trying to show itself as a defender of international legal frameworks and abiding by them, Russia has become a good supporter for Iran, but unfortunately, in the JCPOA case, but unfortunately only in the moral sense. Because the situation that we have been observing is that, when we saw that probably the agreement was about to happen, there's been a number of publications in Russia, analysis and requests for research to see how Iran can become a competitor in various areas to Russia after the nuclear issue is resolved, for example, in the gas market, right? But now we are pretty much back to the previous situation with some changes that we see Iran has got an upper hand in the moral sense, but unfortunately we don't see it helps it much economically or financially so far, despite of, as Robert mentioned, promises of a special purpose vehicle and other mechanisms of promises to stand with Iran given by the other parties. And going back to that situation where everybody is sort of waiting, so we saw Iran sort of, when the negotiations resulted into something successful, we saw Iran looking at our European partners with more interest, which is quite understandable. And now again, and even our Foreign Minister Lavrov mentioned that we are all looking at our European partners right now, what they are ready to suggest to satisfy Iran and to make Tehran stay a part of the deal. So why I earlier asked Prof. Marandi, and I still have that question about the plan. What's the plan? Because it seems like we are all hanging in this situation of waiting what's going to happen. Okay, John Kerry comes to Iran and to talk to Minister Zarif and say, okay, wait a little bit, Trump won't be there anymore, so maybe something changes. So we're just waiting for some blessing to happen, for some external factor, but there is no plan how to counteract sanctions, how to maybe devise some working mechanisms. The majority of Russian experts were also very pessimistic about this special purpose vehicle, and it was supposed to be devised by November, by 5th November, that the second stage of sanctions was returned by Washington, and it was supposed to start working from, I think, from next year, right? But it's not clear how exactly it's going to work, because you can see big businesses, they declared or left Iran, like let's say France's Total, which freshly returned after the agreement was signed, or Peugeot. So we are looking at the medium or small businesses which do not look easy to persuade. So again, we are thinking only about the schemes of oil trade. And also what was, I think we mentioned SWIFT here, and the banking system. Well, here I would like to side with my Iranian colleagues on that, who repeatedly say that from top level to the academia, that unless Iran benefits from the agreement, we're not going to stay a part of it. I think SWIFT was a very good example of that, because I think it never worked. I mean, there was even demonstration in the central bank that they were able to conduct a transfer, but they were not enough, let's say, European banks which were ready to work with the Iranian banks. So it didn't start benefiting, and the situation is quite understandable. Even the way it is being seen from Moscow, it didn't start benefiting. So now that's right, what my Iranian colleagues said, that nothing really changed on 5th November, but things were quite bad in October, when the price of dollar went up, and when there were some other difficulties. I wanted to say a little bit about Russia-Iran cooperation or rivalry in Syria. This is a very interesting matter, because probably some of you see Moscow and Tehran as allies, and sometimes it's being declared that they are strategic allies over there, while we start discovering more and more disagreements in between them, and especially in the post-war reconstruction of Syria, which we see that that was a very interesting example. I think it was General Safavi, the military advisor to the supreme leader, who said that when Iran started to be concerned not only with the military issues, but the leaders started to grasp that it must benefit economically from the investment that has been made throughout this period. And although the figures are not very precise, and there are different reports about that, but I think there was a very interesting report by the Asharq Al-Awsat newspaper about the numbers that Iran paid as a salary to the Syrian governmental servants, and so on and so forth, and how much it costed. Believe me, it costed Russia a lot as well, and we have our own opinion over there. But and now, when Iran is expecting returns from that, there was, for example, one of the, and there has been delegations coming back and forth and trying to negotiate some deals. How me and my Iranian colleagues, who are trying to look reasonably at the situation, we are looking at it, we are not sure that either Russia or Iran capable of post-war reconstruction of Syria. And because I think the lowest level that I have seen, the estimate of how much we need to invest there is 400 billion USD and going up to trillion. Neither Russia nor Iran, both sanctioned, have these means, and European partners promised not to finance anything until Iranian forces are there. And I see this as this diplomatic track as one of the ways where Russia and Iran could cooperate to each other. And there was also interesting thing when what emphasizes why they are rivalries. There was that phosphate deal, which Iranians even declared that it was going to be granted to Tehran for the phosphates extraction, and I think in a couple of weeks Russia said that the contract, both parties, Syria and Russia, they declared that the contract actually was given to Russia. And apart from that, many issues like Russia's balancing between Iran and Israel, Russia supporting and negotiating with Saudi Arabia increase in oil supply to balance the Iran's share, and we can go on and on. So apart from these two areas of cooperation, there are not much. And besides that, unfortunately, we're tackling the perception crisis of each other, especially the way we see it from our Iranian colleagues. That's very often we find ourselves stuck still in Turkmenchai and Gulistan treaties. And more recent failure of Russia to supply the missile defense systems, Russia's balancing between Israel and Iran, and even Russia's leaders' statements, like, for example, our Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Rybkov's statement that probably we will be open to considering a new agreement between Iran and the other international negotiators, which of course was not very well received in Iran. Why I'm saying all of this? Probably I wanted to stress on the Russia's position in the region as an actor who is trying to pose as a strong, practical, pragmatic, and reliable actor, which is, as I said, I think it's a very good expression here, raising up from its knees, and this is the way how it is being presented inside of the country. At the same time, this practical and pragmatic actor is standing by the legal norms, and this was one of our explanations why Russia is not concerned that much with the war in Yemen, simply because it is being stated that Moscow is in Syria, Moscow forces are in Syria upon the invitation of the legitimate government, and it's not the case with Yemen, as simple as that. Russia invested a lot of reputation into the into the agreement, and of course it's trying to pursue it. It doesn't give away the opportunity to make a point before the United States, and again this causes some bad impression onto our Iranian colleagues who think that one day Russia will use Iran as a bargaining chip again. I wouldn't say exactly that, but probably it wouldn't be exaggeration to say that sometimes Russia is playing with that, making this point. And I think there is a very important point to make, which was very well understood in Moscow. I already mentioned that neither party has enough resources for reconstruction of post-war Syria. But Moscow very well understands that although probably Iran cannot make it better economically or in terms of reconstruction, it can always make it worse. And that was one of the main considerations in how Iran's presence was perceived in the country. I guess to avoid being slapped by the moderator, I'll try to stop here and welcome your questions.
شكرا. لا شك انه المسألة معقدة وحزني على المنطقة، لأن حسيت إنه منطقتنا هي منطقة تصفيتها للخلافات، وإشي محزن يعني حقيقة لما بنسمع لها دراستين معقدات من النوع اللي إحنا استمعنا لهم لغاية هاي اللحظة. أنا راح أفتح المجال للحضور للأسئلة، وبفضل إني أقسم الأسئلة على وجبتين حتى ما تكون أسئلة كثيرة من مرة واحدة. راح نأخذ 5-6 متحدثين، ومن ثم نعطيكم مجال تجاوبوا، ونأخذ كمان مرة 5-6 متحدثين حتى يكون أكثر إنصافا في اتجاه الناس. يعني في ناس بيسألوا وبعدين ما بتجي أجوبة لأسئلتهم. أول المسجلين عندي الدكتور عباس، تفضل.
شكرا جزيلا للمتحدثين الكريمين. أنا أتفق مع السيد روبرت، كثير من المسائل يعني الأمور طرحها بصراحة. أريد أن أؤكد على بعض النقاط لكي أشاطره الرأي. أولا، هنا في إيران لا يستطيع أحد أو يتجرأ أحد أن يذكر أو أن يستسلم أو أن يرفع العلم أو الراية البيضاء أمام هذه العقوبات لاعتبارات معروفة في الداخل الإيراني. يعني حتى أتصور زملائي الدكتور محمد والدكتور علام يشاطرونني الرأي. يعني حتى في ما تحدثت في المنافسة بين التيارين الأساسيين، الاستسلام أمام الأمريكي بهذه الطريقة يعتبر انتحار الذي يرفع هذه الراية، ولا يتجرأ أحد حتى إذا لم تكن هناك قناعة. وأنا أتفق بأن هناك قناعة كبيرة. انظروا ما قاله الرئيس روحاني قبل ساعتين، وقارنوا هذا الحديث مع حملته الانتخابية. يعني التعنت الأمريكي يوصل المجتمع الإيراني كسياسيين، كمثقفين، كنخب، وكطلاب جامعات ومدارس، يوصلهم إلى هذا الحد الذي يقول قبل قليل بأننا نرغم أمريكا وننفيها على الأرض، ولا تستطيع أمريكا أن تعاملنا بهذه الطريقة. هذا الصوت العالي بهذه الطريقة يعبر عن يعني الواقع الشعبي المعاصر واليومي لمواجهة هذه العقوبات، وهذا ما أكد عليه السيد روبرت. النقطة الثانية، خلافا لما تقوله الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية، المتضرر الأول هو المواطن الإيراني. يعني هذا واضح. صحيح نحن يعني نصدر وننتج 90% من الأدوية في الداخل. صحيح أننا ميزانيتنا تتكئ 32% فقط على النفط. صحيح أن لكن في نفس الوقت هناك زوايا يتأثر بها المواطن الإيراني، وهو المستهدف في الأساس. فلهذا هذه النقطة الأساسية هي التي ربما توحد الشارع الإيراني وتوحد المواطن الإيراني أكثر من ذي قبل. وحتى الأحداث السابقة، القراءة التاريخية السريعة يبين عندما تدخل عنصر خارجي أو أجنبي في إيران الأمور تتغير بصورة مختلفة. النقطة الثالثة، أنا أتصور بأن لا هناك أبداً لن يحصل حرب عسكرية في الداخل لأمور أمريكية واضحة للداخل الأمريكي، وأمور يعني أمور إقليمية كذلك واضحة. والإيرانيون الأمريكيون يعرفون كيف سيواجهون يعني معسكراتهم وعناصرهم في المنطقة. وربما يتذكرون يعني تيرغيب، تيرغيب
دكتور عباس، هي مش احنا السؤال بدنا دقيقتين يعني.
لا، أسأل عن مصطلح كان في بدايات الأزمة. هناك يقال أسهم الغيب. يعني الأمريكان يعرفون القوارب السريعة، يعرفون أسهم الغيب، ويعرفون كثير من هذه المفردات والأدبيات الإيرانية. فلهذا أنا أريد أقول الموضوع العسكري لن يحل. والنقطة الأخيرة في مجال ما قاله روبرت أعلق، وهذه نقطة أساسية. الإيرانيون عندما واجهوا العقوبات على مدى 4 عقود، وكان العقوبات تحت البند السابع، وكانت الأمم وكان هناك إجماع دولي ضد إيران، استطاعت أن تخرج بالسلام، فكيف الآن الإجماع لأول مرة يحصل على مستوى الرأي العام العالمي وعلى مستوى المؤسسات لصالح إيران؟
أنا ما بكفي هيك
بس
لا كثير والله.
للدكتورة يوليا إذا سمحت
تفضل. وين هي؟
بالنسبة لي أنا أتفق يعني معها. هناك نوع من عدم الطمأنة، هذه عدم الطمأنة تاريخية بالنسبة للإيرانيين تجاه روسيا، هي ناتجة من روسيا القيصرية ومن ثم الاتحاد السوفيتي وكثير من هذه الأمور. وفي تلك الفترة الإيرانيون كانوا في الدائرة الأمريكية، ولكن عندما السيد بوتين يزور إيران وعندما يقول نحن نتعاون مع جارة موثوقة بحد كبير، هذا يبين بأن هناك في أرضية للتعاون المستقبلي. شكرا.
دكتور قاسم، نعطيك دكتور.
مساء الخير. طبعا شكرا للمتحدثين، لكن ملاحظة وعندي سؤالين. يعني الملاحظة هي أنه عندما استمعت للأستاذ روبرت أنه شعرت أنه يتحدث بكثير من الموضوعية والواقعية، وينصف حتى النظرة الإيرانية يعني من وجهة نظر الأمريكية. يعني لم نسمع هذه اللغة الأمريكية، بالعكس عندما استمعنا الأستاذ يوليا شعرنا كأننا نستمع لشخص ليس من روسيا، أنه يمكن من بلد آخر. لأنه بالتجربة على الأقل يعني ما هي سؤالي يعني المباشر للسيدة يوليا، ما هي المصالح الاستراتيجية التي تحكم سياسة روسيا تجاه إيران والمنطقة خلال 7 سنوات الماضية على الأقل منذ الأزمة السورية؟ كان هناك تقريبا شبه تطابق إيراني روسي في الأزمة السورية في النظرة للمنطقة، وساعد ذلك يمكن الرئيس الأمريكي ترامب. يعني في الوقت الذي لم يكن ترامب موجودا كانت علاقات. الآن بظل وجود ترامب، وآخر اجتماع لا أدري حسب المعلومات التي سربت أن ترامب طلب من بوتين إخراج إيران وحزب الله من سوريا، لكن بوتين أجابه هذا موضوع لا نستطيع أن نفرض رأينا فيه، هذا يتعلق بالحكومة السورية. وحسب ما قيل لنا بعض المطلعين أن روسيا حتى الآن تعتبر وجود إيران وحزب الله في سوريا وعلاقتها بإيران موضوع استراتيجي لأنه يخدمها. ما الذي يجعل روسيا تتخلى عن إيران يعني خصوصا في ظل وضع دولي؟ بالمقابل بالنسبة لأمريكا يعني إلى أين تتجه يعني الإدارة الأمريكية يعني بظل هذا الصراع الدائر داخل الإدارة أو داخل السياسة الأمريكية؟ هل هناك توقع ما حصول تغير ما بعد الانتخابات الأمريكية النصفية بأنه يحدث وعي كما الآن يحصل بالنسبة للسعودية بسبب موضوع خاشقجي؟ هل هناك حدث ما يجعل الإدارة الأمريكية تعي أن ما تقوم به اليوم لن يؤدي إلى نتيجة كما قال يعني مزيد من دور إيران، مزيد من انتشار إيران، وللأسف نحن العرب ندفع ثمن سواء تقارب مع إيران أو صراع مع إيران.
الباشا رديسات. شكرا أخي.
عندي ملاحظة بسيطة. ورد في ملاحظات الدكتور روبرت كثيرا اسم الأردن والحماية الأمريكية للأردن والسكيورتي تبع الأردن. أنا أعتقد أنه هذا التون الأمريكي كثيرا ما سيحرج كثير من الدول في المنطقة. وأنا بس بدي أحكي للدكتور روبرت أنه إذا كان الأردن بحاجة للحماية الأمريكية هو لأن الولايات المتحدة هي من خلقت هذه البيئة المضطربة في المنطقة بحيث احتاج الأردن. وأنا أعتقد أنها هاي المعادلة يعني شوية الأمريكان يعني سواء من الإدارة الأمريكية من ترامب الذي يهدد ويقول نحن حامين الكل ونحن حامين وإيران ستأخذكم ب12 دقيقة. أنا أعتقد يجب على الإخوة في الولايات المتحدة أن يخففوا من هذا التون. نحن لم نكن بحاجة للحماية الأمريكية لولا البيئة التي خلقتها الولايات المتحدة. ومن ثم ما يقال عن المساعدات الأمريكية وكأن الأردن عايش على المساعدات الأمريكية. أنا أريد أن أقول لهذه المجموعة كل ما تقول الولايات المتحدة هو عبارة عن $1,000,000,000 منهم $700 مليار هي للأغراض الأمنية التي تؤكد وتخدم المصالح الأمريكية في المنطقة لمحاربة الإرهاب. يعني الأردن هناك يعني انطباعية بأنه عايش على مساعدات الولايات المتحدة، وأنا أنفي هذا الوضع. شكرا.
شكرا باشا. الدكتورة هدى، تطلعاتي مبين كلها يسارية هونك بس لا مسجلك، بس كان في قبلك يعني معلش بس على كل. الدكتورة هدى.
أنا بدي أسأل الأستاذ روبرت، الدكتور روبرت، إنه الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية ترامب يقول أن هناك عقوبات وهو لن يتراجع عن هذه العقوبات. إيران تقول بأنها لن تتراجع أمام هذه العقوبات. إيران تقول بأنه الخلاف معروف، يعني ليس فقط حول الاتفاق النووي، إنما حول أصابع إيران في المنطقة، وهي في العراق، في اليمن، في لبنان، وفي منطقة الخليج العربي وإلى آخره. يعني إيران تقول أنها لن تتراجع، فإذا ليس هناك تراجع من الطرفين. هل تعتقد بأنه اشتداد الأزمة سوف يقود إلى مفاوضات من تحت الطاولة، أم أنه فعليا ممكن أن يقود إلى حرب تقوم بها إسرائيل وبعض الدول التي تتحالف مع إسرائيل؟ بالنسبة إلى السيدة يوليا، يعني أرى بأنه يعني بفترة قلت أنك كنت متفائلة جدا، واليوم تقولين أنك متشائمة جدا. بدي بس أقول بأنه العلاقات الإيرانية الروسية، يعني في سوريا هناك اتفاق وهناك عدم اتفاق، هناك تنافس وهناك اتفاقات، وأيضا هناك تنافس وهناك اتفاقات في مسألة النفط والغاز وإلى آخره. فإذا هذه العلاقة هي إشكالية، هي هناك اتفاقات في مسائل معينة عندما تكون هناك مصلحة لروسيا، وطبعا هناك خلافات. إذا لا نستطيع أن نقول أنه نحن متشائمين أو نحن متفائلين، لأنه المصالح هي التي تحكم هذه العلاقة. وشكرا.
شكرا. آخر الأسئلة في الجولة الأولى، بعدين راح نفتح جولة ثانية مشان نعطيهم مجال يجاوبوا. الدكتور محمد السيد. لا حضرتك أنت سنتبه لا في برضه هناك جامعة عربية.
أيوة يعني أنا شايف إن المداخلة اللي قدمتها الدكتورة يوليا مهمة جدا من أكثر من مدخل، وأعتقد الإخوة في إيران يجب أنهم يكونوا معنيين بها. النقطة الأولى، عندما تكلمت عن أن العلاقات الروسية الإيرانية لها طرف ثالث هو الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية وربما إسرائيل، بمعنى أن الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية وإسرائيل محددان رئيسيان للعلاقات الروسية مع إيران. هل هذا ينطبق بأي درجة، سؤالي، على التفاهمات الإيرانية الروسية في سوريا وعلى العلاقات الثنائية الإيرانية الروسية؟ لأن الأمور قد تبدو بشكل مختلف. الأمر الثاني هو الوضع العربي، الوضع الإيراني. صراع بين العرب وإيران ممتد. الرئيس الأمريكي يقول لدول الخليج: ادفعوا ثمن حمايتكم، أنتم لا تصمدون أمام إيران أسبوعين أو أسبوع وأنا أحميكم. هل هذا الشريك يوثق به؟ روسيا تتعامل بهذه الطريقة مع إيران، أن هناك خلافات داخل حول الإعمار، وحادثة الطائرة اليوشن 20 اللي سقطت كشفت حدود التفاهمات الروسية الإسرائيلية كان هناك ضوء أخضر روسي لإسرائيل تضرب مواقع إيرانية، ضوء أخضر روسي. وكان هناك توافقات حول منع أي وجود إيراني على مسافة 80 أو 100 كيلو من جبهة الجولان. هذه مواقف روسية كشفت بطائرة اليوشل عندما سقطت، وبدأ الأمر يختلف، بمعنى أن لا إيران لها حليف روسي يعتمد عليه، ولا العرب لهم حليف أمريكي يعتمد عليه. أين المخرج؟ هل من تفاهمات؟ هل يمكن أن نصل في هذه الورشة في نهايتها إلى يعني تفكير جديد في علاقات العرب مع إيران وعلاقات إيران مع العرب، بمعنى أن الأطراف الدولية أطراف خالقة للأزمات، وأن استمرار الأمور على ما هي عليه لن تحل الأزمات، وأن التفاهمات الإقليمية العربية الإيرانية ربما تكون أرخص ثمناً وأكفأ، ولكن بشرط أن تكون هناك سياسات جديدة على المستوى العربي وعلى المستوى الإيراني. شكراً.
شكراً يا دكتور. استمعنا ل5 مداخلات، 5 أسئلة، وأنا بالتالي أعطيكم 5 دقائق لكل منكم للإجابة على هذه الأسئلة. أبدأ من الدكتورة يوليا.
Okay. For me not to feel that I'm being discriminated against. Thank you. That's very kind of you. All right, I'll try to address as many points as possible. First of all, I can't help but make a small point about what Dr. Abbas just mentioned, and he mentioned during his presentation about the unity between the citizens, the Iranian people, especially after the recent events. Unfortunately, I tend to disagree with you, and I think this unity needs to be tested because this is sort of double-edged sword. If we talk about foreign invasion into Iran, then yes, we can count on that people will be unified in the face of that. But generally, I think this, in general sense, without any foreign invasion, which is unlikely to happen, as I see it, this unity needs to be tested. And there were many small events in Iran, which I'm holding myself not to quote them right now, we can talk later on, which I strongly doubt about this unity, which you mentioned not only once. Lack of trust between Iran and Russia, sometimes I see it as a self-inflicted thing. One of the recent examples to that is Ali Akbar Velayati's visit to Russia when he met with President Putin, and when he came back there was information published that Russia is going to invest $50 million to support Iranian economy, which Russia never promised this and it didn't confirm. But in Iran, as I remember, it became a fuss, like how come they promise and then they don't stand for their promises. And Turkmenchai, Gulistan, and other things that I mentioned, sometimes things are being presented the way that they are not really are, and this creates complications in our relationships. Strategic interest of the second question about strategic interest of Russia in the Middle East and Iran. Well, I think I spoke about it partially, that Russia is trying to pose as an emerging, strong, practical, pragmatic, and reliable player, although many of you might disagree, but that's the image. As I mentioned, and there was a very beautiful picture I wanted to show, but since I don't have a presentation, I won't, made by Valdai Club. Russia pursues many goals in Syria, which the most important of them are probably testing and advertising its arms for future arms sale, very pragmatic, fighting terrorism, because we have our own problem, especially I think Russia is number 2 on the outflow of people who joined to fight Daesh, and so on and so forth. After the midterm elections, changes after midterm elections and Jamal Khashoggi's murder, well, it's pity that it had to happen this way, but I think finally people around the world found, especially in the United States, they suddenly started seeing things clearly, the things which were not seen clearly, that suddenly we saw that, oh, there is a war in Yemen, and we need to do something about it, or we need to stop the arms sale. These sort of things, which I welcome it very happily, but at the same time, probably Russia is going to put its eggs into different baskets. For example, it is discussing sales of the missile defense complex S-400 with the Saudi Arabia, and probably is going to continue doing so. Dr. Huda, about optimistic and pessimistic approach. That's right, there are agreements and disagreements in Syria, but I wanted to say that, I meant to say that I was pessimistic about the JCPOA, that it will be agreed upon, and when it was agreed upon, I saw it will start crumbling very soon because it doesn't resolve systemic issues, so why should it be in place? Well, yeah, there are agreements and disagreements in any bilateral relationship, but it's hard for us to define it as a strategic one when we look, let's say, at the economy, and our trade turnout is less than $2 billion a year. It's 1.7 for the past year, although we saw some increase this year, and Iran takes 0.5% in the structure of Russian export. So when we see at the figures, there is an idea that there are not really strategic relationships, even though there are some cooperation in Syria even. Okay, about the determinants, the two main determinants in Russia-Iran relationship as United States and Israel sometimes become. Well, it's pretty fair if you look at the history of our relationship, let's say in the 90s, the Gore-Chernomyrdin agreement, when Russia bended and promised the United States that it is even going to quit the Bushehr construction project. So I wouldn't say it's a main factor in their bilateral relationship, but it affects it a lot. And actually, this is the Iranian school led partially by Dr. Allahi Kulai, who is also on that side, that this relationship should be seen as a triangle, and by the way, she's very pessimistic about that too, that they are highly affected by the US policies. And I do agree with you, okay, let me make the last point. I do agree with you about Trump's trying to instill, American government probably trying to instill this impression, and Trump especially, that I'm the only protector and you need to buy our arms. It's all very pragmatic, and I think my thought in my question earlier today was that we need to, and I always say it with my Iranian colleagues as well, we need to a little bit wake up and look at the things clearly, put aside the rhetoric. Since we're trying to reach some common goal, we want to look at the intersection points, to leave the rhetoric aside and see what we really need. Are we really happy that there is some third party defining the relationship in the region and causing the arms race, and furthermore causing the governments to spend a lot of money, a lot of finances on something, well, where this money could have been spent elsewhere? Especially it's very relevant for Iran in the current situation.
5 minutes.
My turn?
Thank you.
All right. I'm timing myself, although I shouldn't. Nobody else did. Okay. All right, so let's get started. So I'm going to go backwards to a few of the questions. First, I want to say a few things that came to mind that weren't part of my presentation, but for the sake of time. One is that there is a fourth and a fifth scenario, right? The fourth scenario is that the Iranian government collapses, right? That's another one I didn't bother to mention because I just find it to be so unlikely based on the current structure of Iranian state and economy. I just think I mean, I agree with Dr. Marandi in this. It's wishful thinking on the part of Iran's enemies to expect a collapse in the near future. I don't think it's analogous to the Soviet Union. It's a much smaller, more compact state and economy that's you know, self-sufficient, more or less. Although not great, right, obviously. The fifth scenario would be some kind of secret negotiation, like what Dr. Huda said, right? That there's some kind of backroom dealing going on that we don't hear about. It's kept very carefully under wraps, maybe involving the Mogherini from the EU and the UN, other, you know, representatives from UN agencies that are involved in the inspections process and things like that. But I just don't see the current, I don't see that happening in the near future. And the reason is because negotiations usually happen when the two sides think that they aren't going to win, right? But the current U.S. administration, as far as it's indicated in its public statements, believes that this is a path towards finally changing the government, right? Or at least bringing it under U.S. subjugation somehow. And, you know, this kind of goes into what one of the other questioners asked me, which was, what about the U.S. administration? Where's it moving after the midterm election? The Senate has more power than the House, and the Senate is still in the hands of the Republican Party. And so the House can damage Trump politically, domestically, but in terms of Iran, in the view of the American public, there's a poll done a few years ago that asked which country, the views of other countries by the United States population. They polled the American public, and the country that people looked at most favorably was Canada. The country that people looked at least favorably, with only 9% favorability, was Iran. Now, the U.S., whether we, you know, want to agree with me or not, is still a democratic system, and the representatives in the government respond to what their constituencies care about. And Americans don't like Iran in theory. They may like Iranian people that they're neighbors with and friends with and fellow students with, but their view of Iran is almost wholly negative. And so it doesn't matter if it's a Democratic House or a Republican House, or a Democratic Senate or a Republican Senate, or a Democratic president or a Republican president, right? Obama didn't actually do that much that was positive for Iran. He did very little. I mean, the harshest sanctions regime maybe that Iran has faced in the last 40 years was during the Obama administration. Kicking them out of the SWIFT system was critical. You know, because it harmed Iranian students all over the world who couldn't receive transfers or send money back and forth outside of the country internally in terms of remittances. So I don't think there's a lot that's going to change. And as far as Khashoggi and his killing, yes, it's going to damage Saudi's, you know, public reputation in the United States, but the current administration is very, very committed to Saudi Arabia for its regional security arrangement along with Israel. So, I mean, Donald Trump has continuously pushed back against any attempts to sanction Saudi Arabia in any way. Now, the House is going to try to do something, but that's more just to publicly shame Donald Trump rather than actually probably going to have any real effects in foreign policy. That's my opinion. And then the last question was, it's more of a response to the comment about Jordan. Now, I wasn't meant to offend by any stretch. I was describing what I thought was a current reality without making a commentary on the why question, but I think your comment was exactly spot on. U.S. needs Jordan probably a lot more than Jordan needs the U.S. And I say that in terms of the aid money. I mean, Jordan is receiving a lot of aid regionally from Saudi Arabia and other countries, you know, to help with budget crises and issues related to water and lack of natural resources and so on. You know, but as is the case with many of the countries in the region, the U.S. has created dependency, right, and for its own interests. And probably, I guess I'll end with this, which is, somebody asked me the other day around a dinner, It was somebody that's not a specialist in the Middle East, and they said, well, okay, how are you going to bring peace to the Middle East? This is a common like trope in the US, right? And I said I'd take a gigantic straw and I'd suck all the oil and all the natural gas out of the region and shoot it into space. And of course the reason is because I do think that the resource curse is the primary cause of, you know, destabilizing factor across the region. It attracts both the U.S., now certainly China and Russia, because of their own energy needs, and it has for a long time, and that creates all types of competitions regionally. So I think I'll end there. Thank you. I know, I ran over by a minute and a half. I apologize, kind of.
Thank you.
Or as the kids say and my students, sorry, not sorry.
اوكي. عندي انا 5 اسماء حاليا مسجلين للدوره الثانيه. الاستاذ حسن، الدكتور علام، والدكتور صبري، والدكتور مرندي، والاستاذ سليمان. راح ناخذ دقيقتين لكل واحد، ومن ثم نعطي يعني 10 دقائق و5 دقائق الباحثين هون وعلى الإجابة على الأسئلة، يعني معنا 20 دقيقة من الآن وطالع. أبدأ بالأستاذ حسن، تفضل.
سؤال الدكتور روبرت. السؤال كالتالي: عندما تنسحب إدارة ترامب من اتفاق دولي وبشكل أحادي، ألا ترون أن هناك عملية يعني مثل نوع من سحب الشرعية أو من القوانين الدولية عندما تنسحب دولة بهذا الشكل الأحادي؟ وما الذي سيدفع اليوم الجمهورية الإسلامية الإيرانية لأن توقع على اتفاق جديد طالما هناك احتمال لانسحاب منه في أي مرحلة من المراحل؟ هذا السؤال. سؤال للسيدة يوليا: عندما تقولين أن هناك بعض الخلافات بين إيران وروسيا فيما يتعلق في الملفات المنطقة وبالذات الآن في سوريا، كيف ترين المستقبل طالما الآن هناك تعاون حثيث بين روسيا وإيران وتركيا فيما يتعلق الملف السوري؟ وفعلا من الناحية العملية أن يكون هناك صراع في هذه المرحلة، وخاصة الآن الوضع السوري لم ينحل بشكل كامل؟ شكرا.
دكتور علام.
Okay, mine is it's rather a comment than a question. But as the old saying goes, it's what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. الضربة التي لا تقتلك تقويك. So President Trump put all his political economic way to destroy Iran economically and of course its political influence in the region. He would rather better win. If not, Iran will become not only stronger but also more aggressive. This is particularly important when Washington has very little or other options but economic pressure at this very, very crucial time in the fragmented Middle East. And here I will move on and I'll discuss what Julia said, and I totally agree with her that it is rather a structural issue, and with a very constructive manner I would rather call it United States doesn't want, regardless of Islamic Republic's regional policies or internal policies or the history, the only thing that United States doesn't want to is the regional hegemon. So that means that is the single US policy in the region. You can be strong only when you are under control. Like Saudi Arabia, you can buy hundreds of billions of weapons, highly advanced, technically advanced. However, you can have them only we can control you, and as President Trump put it, within 2 weeks you will be gone if we don't support you. So that is when power is only accepted by United States when it is under control and it is in a very friendly hands. Iran is not. Iran has its own sustainable security defense. It has its own independent political establishment. So in other words, it can decide things internally and externally, good or bad, I'm not judging, independently regardless of international powers decision.
شكرا دكتور صبري.
يعني لأنه هاي الجلسة اللي بتحدثوا فيها باحثين من روسيا ومن الولايات المتحدة ونظرة خارجية لإيران وللإقليم، قديش في إقليم في العالم تحتل مفهوم الأمن في مثل هذه الأولوية؟ وهل التهديد حقيقي ولا التهديد يتم تغذيته وصناعته؟ بمعنى يعني تشوف أمريكا اللاتينية أو حتى أفريقيا أو أي مكان آخر لا يظهر مفهوم الأمن والخوف والقلق وأثره على العلاقات وعلى التركيبة وعلى التسلح وعلى الظروف الحياتية ونوعية الحياة للمجتمع كما هو في هذا الإقليم. قديش منه هذا مصنوع وقديش منه مطبوع؟ شكرا.
شكرا دكتور صبري. الدكتور مراندي، ما بعرفش الاسم مزبوط.
Very briefly, just sort of sporadic comments. With regard, one point, they were both very, very good presentations, obviously, very impressive. With regards to the issue of the guards that were mentioned, that they were opposed to the agreement, as I was saying earlier to Hoda, that Iranian internal politics are very complicated. It's not really that simple because they are well represented in the Supreme National Security Council. And the Supreme National Security Council supported the JCPOA with all its divisions and different viewpoints that exist. So they weren't opposed to it. They had reservations, but they supported it. With regards to what Julia said, she's absolutely correct. After the JCPOA, there really wasn't much implementation. That's one reason why the Iranians aren't that fearful. There was a psychological warfare campaign going on a few months ago, and that did cause a run on the market in the months preceding the ultimate exit of the United States from the JCPOA and the return of the sanctions. But gradually that dissipated, and I would say that alongside Trump, who I think is a gift to Iran, despite the difficulties, Mohammed bin Salman has been a big gift to Iran, because what he did to Jamal Khashoggi created a sea change, and including inside Iran, because it sort of created a much more confident atmosphere among the general public when they saw the reaction to what happened, and it brought Turkey closer to Iran. This leads me to the final point, so I was going to say that SWIFT, investment, they were all at zero. Total came to Iran, but they didn't invest. SWIFT was not effective. I could not send over the last few years a single dollar from my bank account to anyone else's bank account outside of the country. So there was no enormous change. And finally, and with regards to reconstruction, the France ambassador in Tehran, he came to university and he said that Europeans don't have money to invest either. It's not as if right now no one really has all that much money, maybe the Chinese, and they're right now in trouble with or in conflict with Americans. Finally, with regards to Iran-Russian relations, I think that's a realistic analysis. I think, though, that the Iranian relationship with Russia, with China, it's all based on different issues. So with China, they have one sort of relationship, with Russia another. The Iranians are not actually, they don't have a problem with Russia and the United States. My understanding, of course, Dr. Kulai comes from a particular school of thought, but for example, and this is the final point, in the case of Iraq, Iran was quite, even though they knew al-Abadi was closer to the United States, the Iranians were quite happy that he would stay in power. It was only when the Americans pushed for al-Abadi to turn against Iran that Iran spoke to its allies and said this is going to cause major trouble. And so Iran ultimately, the people who were put in power through parliament, they were people who the Iranians felt were okay with the Americans. The Iranians didn't push for an anti-American prime minister in Iraq. And in the case, it has its benefits to have someone who can speak with the Americans, whether it's the Russians or the Iraqis or anyone else.
شكرا. آخر المداخلات إلا إذا كان في حد آخر يحب يتكلم هو الأستاذ سليمان. تفضل.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أشكر المحاضرين ويبدو لي ولا أدري لماذا فهمت بهذه الطريقة أن زميلنا روبرت يعني عبر عن وجهة نظر محايدة وكنت أنتظر وجهة نظر قريبة من الرئيس ترامب أو من الإدارة. أما
ليش؟
أنا جزء من الموج
تعاطف بما فيه الكفاية مع إيران فيما يبدو لي. أما زميلتنا يوليان فأنا أشكرها على الحقيقة واقعيتها وعلى التعبير الدقيق عن الموقف الروسي والمصالح الروسية. وبالفعل كما توقعت أعطتني انطباع بأنه إلغاء الاتفاق النووي يمثل مصلحة استراتيجية لروسيا، وهذا أمر منطقي لأن تضعضع العلاقة بين الولايات المتحدة وقوة رئيسية إقليمية مثل إيران يفيد روسيا، كما هو الأمر للمملكة العربية السعودية عندما تتضعضع العلاقات الأمريكية السعودية. بالتأكيد أن تلك الحالة ستكون فرصة استراتيجية لروسيا. والخلاصة التي أخلص إليها أن إلغاء الاتفاق النووي هو فرصة تاريخية للتنافس القوتين الدوليتين الولايات المتحدة والاتحاد الروسي، وهذا يتيح لنا فرصة نحن في المنطقة لكي ما نستفيد من هذا التنافس الدولي أو ما يشبه علاقة القطبين أثناء صراع الحرب الباردة بين الاتحاد السوفيتي والولايات المتحدة، عندما تم الحفاظ على توازن القوى في الشرق الأوسط، وهذه مصلحة عربية.
شكرا. أوكي، نهاية الأسئلة. الآن بعطي 5 دقائق. في عندك سؤال؟ بعطي 5 دقائق. ببدأ من الأستاذ روبرت. عندك؟ لا أنت سألتي. عند الأستاذ روبرت ومن ثم أنتقل للأستاذة يوليا. تفضل.
I misunderstood Dr. Huda's question. I believe she was actually asking in the last part about whether there was under-the-table negotiations against Iran, right, to wage some kind of war against Iran, with led by Israel. I mean, that's more possible. Let's put it this way. That's maybe more than 50% possible, because we know that in the George W. Bush era there was a lot of pressure on his administration by Israel to attack Iran, and ironically it was Condoleezza Rice that moved them back from the brink and fought against Cheney and the cabinet to not do that. So it's not as if we don't have evidence of Netanyahu's government advocating for that kind of aggressive. I mean, they need the U.S., right? Israel cannot attack Iran unilaterally because of its limitations militarily, but so they need the refueling jets at minimum of the U.S. And that's why I mentioned in my talk that I think that one of the biggest dangers is this wag the dog situation, where the tail wagging the dog, where a smaller, weaker ally drags the U.S. into a larger confrontation. But we're hoping not. I want to say one thing I missed, which was that I thought of another issue that I didn't highlight about Iran's use of reconstruction as a soft power strategy. Now, a number of you are from Lebanon, and you know that most of the Dahya was rebuilt by Iranian money. I mean, I don't think it's kind of an open secret. So after the 2006 war with Israel, a lot of the rebuilding in Lebanon was funded by Iran. And this is the case in other places as well. And so it was interesting when Dr. Yulia mentioned that there's this debate over who will reconstruct Syria. It makes complete sense to me. I wouldn't be surprised if once the Yemeni conflict is resolved, that Iran would love to, if the Houthis can at least win a part in that post-war reconstruction, that they would want to rebuild those areas in Saada and the areas in northern Yemen. It is part of their, but it's a soft power strategy, right? It's, oh, look, we rebuilt your buildings that the evil enemy destroyed, right? I mean, it makes sense. It's a pragmatic approach. Anyway, my short answer to your question is none. What motivation would there be for Iran to participate again? I mean, there's so little. The only motivation would be if they are driven to the brink of economic collapse, or, and I don't see that happening in the near future. It's possible in the long term if the sanctions regime somehow were able to be made more robust. But the U.S. had its maximum leverage when Obama was president, and they'd gotten Russia and China to sign off on these sanctions. Right now, Trump is trying to reenact a sanctions regime that is much weaker because he's lost many of his allies, most importantly Europe. So it's not likely, and it does do great damage to international agreements. As far as just a brief comment to Dr. Marandis. I fell into the trap, maybe for the sake of the brevity of the lecture and so on, of regurgitating this idea of a monolithic IRGC or a monolithic Iran, and I certainly don't agree with that. I think there are, Iran's probably best way to characterize Iranian domestic politics is factionalism, some kind of factional quasi-democratic system. I say quasi because I disagree a bit with you about, the role of the Guardian Council and others in the presidential election and other things, and purging electoral lists is a problem. But there is competition, and the competition is not just in the terms of elections, but it's also in terms of the entirety of the system. Right? There's a lot of competitive groups vying for wealth, power, what everyone else vies for, right? So I think those were all the questions that were to me, unless I missed one. So thank you.
If I may ask Dr. Hassan to clarify his question once again, because I didn't quite understand it.
I was saying when you say that... When you say that there is a problem between Iran and Russia about these different questions, especially in Syria, let's say. And I see now why you think that will be a problem when Russia needs somehow that Iran be in the next negotiation, especially which concern the constitution in Syria. And actually we start to let's say in the end of the problem of Syria. If we try to find a solution right now, why you think that will be a problem between Iran and Syria, actually? Even if it is now there's some problem that Russia negotiate with Israel about the border and not to let Iranian to be near the Israeli border. This is maybe the main question, which was the difficult problem between Iran and Russia and Syria.
Thank you. I'll try to address it as much as I can. Well, I guess Russia is just trying to, as the way, again, referring to what I said earlier, the way Russia is posing itself as a not only rational and pragmatic actor, but someone who can be relied upon as a mediator, as an international mediator. So Russia is interested to involve all the parties which need to have their say in the process. And that's why it's also engaging Iran, and partially because, as I also said at the end of my presentation, because Russia clearly understands that Iran can make things worse on the ground. The difficult part here with the engagement, well, first of all, Russia finds itself in a very precarious situation when it has to balance many parties like Iran and Israel. And of course, our Iranian partners, I think they have a lack of understanding how Russia can even afford to have this role. And I had this question asked from me, myself, and my colleagues many times. But the thing is, Russia is trying to prevent any sort of escalation and to negotiate the way out. And so far, the way it was going, I think it was okay, even with Iran not being present at the recent meeting in Istanbul, but approving what happened there, because Russia minds it's interested as much as it can. But besides balancing in between in this difficult situation, it's also difficult to define Iran's presence in Syria as such, because, well, you know that Turkey controls this part, American-backed rebels or whoever, they control this part, but Iran is sort of everywhere. And given Russia's limited ability to influence that, yes, referring to the previous question, that Russia said that, I think it was Deputy Foreign Minister Rabkov who said that, and Putin also said about that, I guess, that we can try to talk Iran for it to withdraw 80 kilometers from the border. But then they tried to correct themselves, which I think our Iranian partners also played into the same gate and said that it was actually in favor of Iran as well. Russia is trying to prevent the escalation, and it involves all the parties which it thinks must have their say. And I think it's been, given the latest meeting with the leaders of France and Germany, I think it has been doing pretty well. I wanted to comment on what Dr. Alam Saleh said about what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. I believe the situation is quite different for Iran now, and again, if we put aside the bravado that we've been through it so many times and we can do it again, I'm a pessimist. The situation is quite difficult, and although Iran has got an upper hand in the moral sense, well, I don't know, let's try to tell it to the passengers of Iran Air right now, who are not going to get their airplanes. I sometimes happen to be one of them. About the threats, are they real or fabricated? Well, it depends, and it depends a lot on the threat perception. What we see as a threat, I think for Russia, again, this is an assertive policy, and partially the threat of terrorism coming back home, the way Russia sees it, is real on the North Caucasus. For Iran, probably it's more relevant, but I think a lot of this Iran's vision of threats refers to the experience of Iran-Iraq war. And I think this is, to Dr. Abbas, this is in that vein of what really unites Iranians. Not even recent events with the terrorist acts when unfortunately, there were so many rumors that these acts could have been arranged from within the country by the forces affiliated to the government, unfortunately. So this is very, the threat perception being seen through the lens of the Iran-Iraq war, which understandably Iran remained almost alone against everyone, is more uniting, and it affects a lot the further threat perception from the outside. But I think the attempt to play on this in the Iranian domestic politics is less successful recently because of the lack of resources to develop human capital within the country. And I agree with Dr. Marandi about that. Not much implementation happened after the GCPOA was agreed upon, and that's a very interesting point. You know, we talk in the very general terms, but when you see things on the ground, it becomes so much clearer. For example, even in the relationship between Iran and Russia, the businesses which used to be in Russia for a long time, they're still carrying money in the suitcases. I mean, there is no system to pass the money. Yes, sometimes they use Sarafi, Havala system, and the only bank serving the interests of Russia-Iran businesses was Mir Business Bank, affiliated with Bank Milli Iran, which was sanctioned recently by this November sanctions. So it has been the customs issues and different things. It has been extremely difficult. And but I think a good point here is that those systems that has been devised throughout the years, and they are still functioning because nothing changed. But it really has been extremely difficult. And if I may, just 30 seconds. What I'm experiencing right now, I'm currently based in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and what we've been seeing during GCPOA implementation, how we saw the Saudi money in the country, and there are a lot of Saudi money, they've been affecting the attitude towards Shia Muslims, towards Iranians in general, rumors about the spreading of Shiite Islam and so on and so forth, and how just simply like finance system, insurance companies, they stopped almost without a notice to serve Iranian citizens. I'm not talking about anyone special, just Iranian citizens. And now after the sanctions, we see how the papers, the letters are circulating throughout the companies, making life even worse by prohibiting all the countries. And for example, in countries like Malaysia, which is mostly governmentally owned, the whole economy is governmental owned practically, in the practical sense, life becomes unbearable. And as you know, Southeast Asia used to be a very convenient hub where these systems were built to avoid sanctions. So it has been difficult, and unfortunately I think it is going to be more difficult. So I think Iran will try to save a good face at a bad game, but I'm very sympathetic and very upset that it has to be so.
Thank you. لك تفضل. بيحكوا شيء
أنا
بس إيش سريع يعني.
سريع بعتذر إنه نفسي أسمع تعليق يعني الدكتور روبرت على البعد الإسرائيلي في السياسة الأمريكية تجاه إيران، لأنه في مشكلة عند ترامب بالتحديد بين العقلية البراغماتية اللي ممكن تدفعه إن هو مع الطرح بتاع أمريكا أولاً إن هو يستخدم إيران كفزاعة علشان يستفيد مالياً من الخليج بأقصى قدر ممكن، لكن في الجانب العقائدي اللي هو يعني إنه ترامب عنده توجه يعني عقائدي تجاه إسرائيل، تجاه الحركة الصهيونية، وده بيخليه بيطرح سؤال مهم جدا: ماذا لو فشلت العقوبات الأمريكية ضد إيران؟ وده أنا متوقعه شخصيا، لأنه يعني المخرج الوحيد لإسرائيل إنها هترجع لنفس السياسة القديمة بالدفع نحو عمل عسكري من جانب الولايات المتحدة، وفرصتها الوحيدة حسب تحليلي الشخصي وقد أكون مخطئ إن هو السنة الثالثة اللي هي هيبقى السنة الجاية سنة 19 اللي هي قبل آخر سنة للولاية الأولى لترامب، علشان يقدر يعني إذا نجحت إيران في الصمود أمام العقوبات الاقتصادية وفشلت إسرائيل في جر الولايات المتحدة عسكريا عام 19 عشان توجه إيران لضربة، أظن في تحولات كتيرة جدا ممكن تحصل في الشرق الأوسط. فهل هذا assessment يعني valid ولا ده مجرد فانتزي يعني ممكن؟ شكرا جزيلا.
منيح اللي كان سريع السؤال. يعني من الأهرام مش متوقع عنها أكثر. غير هيك تفضل، نحاول الإجابة تكون سريعة على أي حال. شكرا.
Okay. Well, you know that it's not impossible. I mean, you know, my understanding of the question was, could Israel, or I guess its supporters in the U.S., be able to push Trump to wage a war or some kind of limited war against Iran in 2019, which would allow him to do damage control before he had to run for election in 2020, that's in general, that's always true about U.S. politics, is presidents are risk averse during the year that they're running for re-election. So if he was to do anything else major in general, domestically or internationally, it would need to be next year, this coming year. But it's not okay. It's not out of the realm of possibility because of the, as I mentioned before, the low or the kind of lack of empathy towards Iran by the U.S. population. I'd say it's a lack of general empathy at a theoretical level. It's not the interpersonal relationship that people don't like Iranians. It's the more general kind of theoretical idea of this enemy, kind of like the view of the Soviet Union during the Cold War. So if Trump was able to he would have to manufacture a pretty clear reasons for doing so. And the problem is that barring some kind of attack on Americans' interests directly, it's not likely that he's going to be able to convince the American population, who are still very much against him personally. Right? His ratings are hovering in the 30s and 40%, despite a booming economy. So I guess I would say that it's not likely because of Trump's personal unpopularity in the U.S. and the kind of the very low level of trust that the majority of Americans have for him as a leader in that context. They don't, you know, and so I just don't think that, despite, I know there's this perception that Israel kind of, I guess, controls U.S. foreign policy. Sometimes that's how it's been portrayed to me in some conversations, but I don't think we can give too much power to the Israelis in that regard. They still have limitations on how much they can leverage their clout within the American government. So, you know, anything's possible, right? Anything's possible, but I'd say for the reasons I just laid out, it's probably unlikely.
اسمحوا لي بالنهاية نشكركم بالدرجة الأولى لحضوركم. بعرف إنه بعد الغداء يعني من الصعب الوضع بيكون، ولكن تحملته، وواجب إني أشكركم جميعا على تواجدكم معنا. أشكر الباحثين على الدراسات اللي قدموها، مهمة جدا إلنا يعني، وتابعناها باهتمام. لابد طبعا وهي وصلت من الشكر مرة أخرى الأستاذ عريب ومركز القدس جميعا، والأخوة في كونراد أديناور على تنظيمهم وعلى الفعاليات اللي عملوها، ومشكورين من طرفنا جميعا.